Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we're recording from Trinity Church of Austin following a 3-day Texas Impact Board retreat. The Texas Impact Board of Directors represent a wide range of judicatories and faith traditions from across Texas. Every 2 years, they come together to create a consensus set of legislative priorities to guide the organization's work throughout the biennium. In the next few weeks, we'll have a series of episodes rolling out that agenda, which should be released in full to the public next week. But for today, I thought we'd talk to 3 of our board members about the process and reflect a little on where we are as a state. And y'all, I have to say, I've worked here for about a dozen years, and I always love this process. Watching such a diverse group of religious leaders grapple with public policy priorities through the lens of their tradition social statements, and doing the intentional work of listening and coming to consensus on the legislative agenda so that they can unanimously endorse that is a sight to behold. But that's what gives the final product and our collective advocacy work such power. And I hope you'll tune in as we roll out that agenda, but more, I hope you'll consider what you can do to help implement that agenda. For the next few weeks, that means working to engage your congregation and community in the civic engagement work necessary this election season, but also beginning to prepare for the Texas legislature that will convene in January. You can find tools, teams, and resources for all of that on our website at texasimpact.org. Special shout out to the Texas Faith Votes page and resources because those are especially timely right now. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can shoot me an email at scott@texasimpact.org. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Texas Impact board members Reverend Jessica Cain, Reverend Dan DeLeon, and Reverend Leslie Jackson. Joining us for today's conversation are 3 Texas Impact board members sitting in the hallway of Trinity Church in Austin. Hopefully there's not too much background noise today, but really appreciate you 3 sticking around. I'm going to let them introduce themselves so you can hear their full voice. Leslie, talk to us about you.
All right. I am Reverend Leslie Jackson, Senior Pastor of St. Peter United Church of Christ in Houston, Texas.
I'm Dan DeLeon, Senior Pastor of Friends Congregational Church, United Church of Christ in College Station, Texas.
And I'm Jessica Cain, pastor of Living Word Lutheran Church in Buda, Texas.
And we just wrapped up day 3 of the Texas Impact Board Retreat. And y'all, I've been in this job for a dozen or so years. And one of the things I love most about this organization is the way Texans of faith come together to find a consensus legislative agenda. A couple of y'all have done this once or twice. I don't know if anybody's doing it for the first time, but talk about the process we've been through over the course of the last 3 days and what you take away from this board retreat.
Who's going to go first?
You got it.
I mean, at this point, our brains are kind of mush because, we started on Sunday and, some of us had church on Sunday and had to work on Sunday. It's been a long few days. So, yeah. What do you think?
Well, we started off on Sunday evening with what was supposed to be a fairly informal conversation that led right into the work of prepping the agenda and thinking about what this legislative session is going to look like. Hearing some not so wonderful forecasts about the things we might be facing, but also a lot of hope about our ability to speak into that space and affect change.
Yeah, and I think that what prompted me or got me excited about the work we were doing right off the bat to what Jessica's saying is that with all this is going to be a rough year kind of news, and looking around the room, I just had this sense of, but we're still here. Yeah. And we care about what it is that we're doing. And I'm excited about what it is that we can be, the light that we can be shining in the midst of so much gloom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday when we opened, I did this devotional meditation really about gratitude and affirming where we are and remembering where we've come from and the people who have done this work before us. And so throughout the last couple of days, I've been trying to hold on to that gratitude and that hope as we discuss things that we know will probably not get passed or things we know will get shot down, but also remembering that other people did this work before us. And, and I made a comment yesterday about it wasn't that long ago that I probably wouldn't even have been standing or sitting in the same room with the folks who are here having this particular conversation, whether it's my race or my sexual orientation. There are other things that would have kept me from being in this room. So trying to hold on to that in the midst of understanding that like we're in progress. That's the best way I can put it.
We are in progress. And one of the things that I always love about this coalition is you have people from a wide range of faith traditions who come together and talk about some really hard topics. And the thing I love about Texas Impact is when you see our legislative agenda, we'll talk about it on this program over the course of the next few weeks, all of those were unanimously approved by this board. It's a consensus model, but there's some really ambitious tasks on there, some really ambitious items. So talk to us some about how it feels to be in a room with people from so many different faith traditions who can find consensus on these challenging topics.
Let me just say, because I don't know how much I should disclose, but my politics and my theology are shaped by this process. So, I grew up here in Texas. I grew up in the suburbs, and my theology and my politics were very, very conservative at a very, very young age. So I'm aware of when we're having conversations where my growing edges are, and it has been great. I'm probably being too vulnerable and sharing way too much, but it's been great to be shaped and changed in every board retreat that we've done. So there have been times this weekend where I've spoke up for something that I probably did not support or believe in 2 or 3 years ago.
I think one of the things that I find inspiring about this process together, this consensus making, is we spend so much time with Texas Impact doing things that seem like running up against a brick wall and hoping that it will move ever so slightly. And so being in a place where we can all acknowledge that a lot of these things really are ambitious. A lot of these things probably are not going to come to pass, and certainly not in the next 6 to 8 months. But also saying this really does matter. In an ideal world, this is what we want to see. This is what we see as kingdom work, as the work of justice that God has called us to. Doing that together and having that conversation about the challenges, yes, and also the real ideals and hopes that we have is helpful. And then some of just the really nuanced conversations that we're having that are still really life-giving, arguing in a lovely way about the wording of a specific part of the legislative agenda and saying, we all know we want this, but how are we going to say it so that it's the clearest possible way is really, it's just nice to be in a space like that instead of, no, can you please just see other people as human beings, for example, which seems to be what we're constantly saying.
Yeah, we people of faith are nothing if not wordsmiths. I think some of what impresses me about the unanimity of our decision making is how we listen, and that is a challenge for anyone, but that in listening, especially in the small groups part of this time that we've had together, we hear not only perspectives but priorities. And what matters to me is not as important to the person sitting next to me, and vice versa. But in listening to one another, they become equally important. I mean, for example, one of our board members representing Muslim communities, our Muslim siblings, was talking about how crucial it was in looking at education to be opposed to curriculum that are pushing Christian nationalism, I'm going to say, that oppresses anything to the contrary, and that pushes out so many of our siblings of faith and otherwise. And all of a sudden I was fired up to recognize that being important. And last thing I want to say about that is that the process of listening is an act of resistance, because the politicians that we are seeking to be in covenant with and to have relationship with to make these changes happen, very often they do not listen, and they are supposed to. And our accountability comes from a place of listening that says this is where our power is, Now listen to us. So that to me has been a big takeaway from this retreat.
You are three very busy humans. I see your schedule. I know we've been talking. I know some of y'all have to leave here very soon to get to other things. There are so many things that dominate clergy members' time. But you've chosen to take 3 days out of your schedule to be a part of this retreat and to do the justice work year round. Why is this such a priority for you?
This is the walking the talk part of things. I can stand up and preach on Sunday morning until I'm blue in the face about how important it is for us to live out our baptismal calling to strive for justice and peace in all the earth. But if I'm not actually working on that, then what would compel the members of my congregation to do so? What would compel the folks in my synod to do so as well? If I, as a faith leader, can't find the time and the space to do that work, then how can I in any way expect other people to do so who are just as busy and can't say, this is part of my work and my calling in this particular space?
I think it matters a lot to me also, yes, to everything, Jessica, that you just said. And also, for me, it's an experiential thing where, how can I put this? Theologically speaking, it has to do with incarnation, right? Just being an embodied presence of the goodness of God with and for one another, and that's why we get together. But speaking in less theological terms, it just has to do with experience. I can't witness to what I haven't experienced. And that experience comes in, again, us listening to and learning from one another, valuing and honoring one another in this process. And then in going back to our respective communities of faith, being able to speak to what it is that we have experienced so that we can then hope to stoke that fire of faith within each and every one of us that we can mobilize. Otherwise, it's just kind of knowing what the, for example, in why we've been meeting, what the legislative agenda is, but not having any experience as to why that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to preach a sermon, but Revelation 21.
Yes,
I really do.
Yes, you do.
Revelation 21 comes to mind, and it says, "And behold, I saw a new heaven and a new earth." And my theological background would say, that we're all going to get snatched up, and the believers will be gone. There's a rapture and all this stuff. But now that I've been through seminary and went to a really excellent school, we see that no one's going anywhere. We are working towards creating the new heaven and a new earth, right? And so I think about my congregants and where I'm having to preach a message of hope and prosperity and encouragement and motivation from Sunday to Sunday, but also knowing that I'm having to do that because they live in a system that is oppressing them and that is harming them and their families. Yeah. And so on one hand, it's hope and healing. On the other hand, we got to do something to not have to do all of this healing on this other side. So that's what keeps me motivated to do this work.
And a couple of y'all have talked about your congregations. You're going to be going back to them at a time where there is a lot of that tension, right? That anxiety, but that hope. Y'all, we've got less than 2 months until Election Day. And I know there are a lot of people out there who are feeling that anxiety. But Leslie, when you and I were talking after yesterday's session, you talked about the need for faith leaders, the need for us to talk about hope, to talk about, the arc of the moral universe bending towards justice. Like we're going to get there, but people are feeling it right now. So what advice do you have? What message of hope do y'all have for people as we navigate this tense few months?
I think some of the places that I find hope are in community, in seeing that we're not alone. I think that's where some of that anxiety and fear really develops, is thinking, it's just me. I'm the only one who's this worried. I'm the only one who feels the weight of the world on my shoulders, and yet it's all of us. And we know that when we share those burdens, they feel less, even though they are just as real and just as important to address right now. So I consistently go back to community and living in the hope that God has everything in God's hands, And there are many people, Leslie, to your point from the meditation, we look back on those folks who led us through certain periods of time and we think, wow, they were so awesome, which is true. But they were awesome because of the tenacity, the continuing to live in hope, the continuing to be in community and trust that the work that they were doing would lead to other work in the future as well. And, it's terrible to be in the middle of history. My hope for my children is that they don't have to live through as much history as I have. But that idea that we are not alone right now, but we're also not alone if you look at the scope of history, that faithful people have spoken out and lived through hard, anxious seasons before.
Yeah. What is that proverb that says we plant trees that we will not experience the shade of, but that, future generations will? That's what comes to mind when you say that. Wow.
I think it's the community part of it is so strong, and I relate to that with something recently, just a few weeks ago, where I just said in the middle of a sermon, we need more good news, don't we? And there was this gasp of yes. And so to be reminded of that, it was a good moment for everyone to share the experience of not being alone. So there's power in that. But also for us, what makes me nervous, ironically, is that we're called to be, as we say in the United Church of Christ, a non-anxious presence.
Oh, good luck with that.
Right? And how do we do that? How do we do that when we are so anxious ourselves? We have to be honest, right? I mean, like let's just own that right now and confess that we have our anxiousness in this time too. But Jessica, thank you for the reminder, and Leslie for the reminder that we're people of faith. We're people of remembrance to that faith. And that the more we call ourselves to that, then the more we will recognize that while it is terrible living in the middle of history, like Jessica just said, it is just a moment and it will pass. That does not give us license to sit back with indifference, because we know that that is the opposite of love. But if anything, it spurs us even more to be strong and weather through this, recognizing that this is a moment. And how will we contribute to it so that ultimately its trajectory continues faithfully toward hope?
Yeah, the community has been important this weekend, and it has been good to sit in the space with people who are feeling some of those same emotions and anxiety and hope and joy and all those things that float in the space. Recently, I've also been kind of meditating on this idea of being thankful and grateful in all things, and then also Hebrews. I think I this weekend I've misquoted where scripture was a few times, but I'm always like, I spent a whole lot of money on a theological education, and prior to that I could tell you where everything was in the Bible, and now I can't tell you where hardly anything is. But anyway, I think it's in Hebrews somewhere where it says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And so when we think about the work that we have to do here in Texas, this is a matter of faith, because there is no evidence that these things are happening now. And so that is the substance of the things that we hope for. And we're working towards bringing that into, or manifesting that particular reality here. What I want to add to that is I've also been thinking about in my personal life, that wisdom and my faith has grown through suffering. What do I mean by that? If there is no challenge, if there is no opportunity, then how does our faith then get exercised? If you are not seeking something, how then are we using our faith? And as we have overcome things in our personal lives or in the community, remembering that there was a time we felt hopeless, but we were able to get through it and achieve what we desired. And in that, wisdom is created. There's a whole book that I think I'm going to write in that, but I know I've said a lot. I'm not saying I condone suffering or violence or any of those things, but how Spirit uses that to make us wiser and to increase our faith has been a little intellectual and spiritual endeavor I've been on for the last few weeks.
I want to say real quick to that, thank you for reminding us that suffering is a part of the process.
Yeah.
And that empowers us to be able to say, did you think this was going to be easy? Suffering is a piece of this.
Yeah.
You don't want to romanticize suffering, but at the same time, you can celebrate it. You can flip it.
Right.
And then second, what has been encouraging to me when you talked about evidence, pointing to a win.
Yeah.
Is we were reminded of that also in our time together here, that there have been wins. We just don't pay that much attention to them because we give more credence to the doomsday scenarios that people love to just keep us hopeless. Yeah. So that's part of what we are also equipped with, is being able to remind each other of the wins, like with maternal health and moving forward in that on that path in looking at reproductive justice. We're not going to be able to get everything that we want overnight, but there are ways that we can move toward that position us for even bigger victories along the way that people aren't recognizing as much.
Yeah.
All three of you talked about community. All three of you talked about anxiety. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about over the course of the last few weeks as we've traveled the state and met with people, and I think I've talked about it on this podcast a couple of times, is when I sit on my couch at home and watch cable news or scroll Twitter or do whatever, or X or whatever we're calling it these days, that's when I get anxious. But we've had so many opportunities over the last few weeks to gather with people of faith who are doing the work, who are organizing in their congregation, who are talking about public policy, who are doing postcard campaigns to encourage people to vote. And when we're in those rooms, I feel such hope, and there's joy and there's laughter, and like everybody's enjoying the civic engagement process. And so I do think it's a reminder that like we're not supposed to be in this alone. That being with community, being with other people who are doing this work for justice, who are doing the civic engagement work, is supposed to be fun. And I think we found that. So as we close out our time together, I wonder if y'all have any closing thoughts for listeners, anything that you hope that they'll consider, anything that you hope that they'll do as y'all leave this retreat and go back into the real world.
One of our speakers yesterday who talked kind of about policy things that are coming up said something about how there are people in Texas trying to take away your ability to vote. So the answer is vote. And I think that applies to a number of things. We were just talking about how much harder it is to get into the Capitol in a big group, or to get into the meetings, or to be there at the time that they say, but then the time changes. There are many barriers that are being thrown up, which to me just says they know how powerful our voice and our collective action is. And so therefore, even more so, vote, check your voter registration, and go to the Capitol and write to your legislators, because your voice really does matter. That's why they're trying to silence it, whoever they is right now.
Something else too with that is oftentimes we'll hear it in our houses of worship, in faith circles, of being a voice for the voiceless, and we go, hang on. Actually, the biblical witness is that everyone has a voice, and we're called to amplify the voices that are there by being in solidarity with them. And so to apply that practically, yes, we want to get people to register to vote, but if we took a look at how many people are registered to vote that do not vote, even within our own congregations, that number would be staggering. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us to be able to amplify our prophetic voice to say, like, registering is fine. That gives you the voice, but you need to have that voice heard. You give witness to a faith where voices that are supposedly silenced speak the loudest. These are the stories that we give witness to. Why don't you create a new story by getting out there and voting and changing things? You have the power to do that.
Let me just bring the altar call with this. I think is what we're going to do. It's time to come to the altar.
Now you're going to preach.
Anxiety is infectious, but so is joy. So is hope. And we've talked about community. And so my altar call is it's not just get back to your church. It's also find your people, find your community, because cable news and Twitter and social media and Facebook is going to give you all of the anxiety that you need. But if we can get out and connect with people, that also will give you the joy and the inspiration and the hope that you need. So I think it was maybe an interview with a vampire movie. Wherever would you get vampires mentioned on a public?
This might be a first.
Theological podcast. Good.
From the guy who just said he keeps forgetting where the scripture verses are.
Yeah. I could be in the wrong movie too. But when I think it's Lestat, he's calling the vampires to come out, and he's like, come out wherever you are. And so that is my call to action, is for you that are listening. If you're feeling isolated, disconnected, and hopeless and wondering what to do, come out wherever you are. We're waiting.
So vote like a vampire.
Vote like a vampire.
Let's go.
Things I did not expect on this podcast today, but y'all were rolling.
Yes.
Hey, I really do appreciate y'all's service, you spending the time and you spending the extra time to be on the podcast today. My hope is that all of you who are listening have your homework. We know what we have to do, and that's go find all of our vampires and get them out to vote and engage them in the process, lift up those voices. So thank y'all for the time today.
Yes. Vampire rights are human rights.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Jessica, Dan, and Leslie. Y'all, I don't know how we ended up talking about vampires. It was a long week, but I do hope everyone will consider what you can do to help move this set of legislative priorities forward. And that starts with doing some civic engagement work with your congregation and community this election season to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. I can't wait to hear about your work. As always, Texas Impact has tools for you. I especially hope everyone is using the Texas Faith Votes resources. You can find those and so much more at texasimpact.org. While you're there, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can reach me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Attinen, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.